Hey, what's up guys? It's me. Welcome back to my channel, where today we are sitting in one of the most expensive homes in America, if not the most expensive home in America. This house is going for $1.8 billion. It has 9 bedrooms, 22 bathrooms. So let's check out this beautiful mansion together. So, welcome to the 75,000 square foot mansion, which used to belong to oil billionaire Jesse H. Jones. Now, this was built in 1936. He passed away in 1956, and so after he passed away, his son donated the house to his grandchildren. Now they are reselling the house and that SY&S on the market for $1.8 billion. I want to talk about something else today, though. When I saw the architecture of this house, it reminded me of a very particular airplane that was made around the same time this house was being made. And that is the T-50, Golden Eagle. So let's talk about the history behind the T-50 Golden Eagle. So, the T-50 Golden Eagle was manufactured by North American Aviation in the mid-1930s, and it was actually designed by Donald Wills. And this aircraft actually had several versions. You had the T-50, the BT-13, and then also the SNJ, which all had different names depending on the role that they played. But they were all basically the same aircraft. And this aircraft was famous because it was the first all-metal training aircraft to be adopted by the United States military. So this was a huge step forward for training aircraft. It actually had a lot of new technologies put into it. The first prototype flew in September of 1934, and then after they got the first prototype off the ground, then they started manufacturing them in December of 1934. Now, the T-50 Golden Eagle had a really interesting name behind it. So when they did their first test flight, they didn't call it the T-50. They actually called it the Black Egg. Now, they named it the Black Egg, because the fuselage paint scheme was black with silver lettering. And that's how they ended up with the nickname, but they wanted to change that because it sounded too much like a chicken. So they changed the name from the Black Egg to the Golden Eagle. And the Golden Eagle obviously was a bird of prey, so it was kind of fitting for the aircraft at the time. They also had a little bit of an engine problem, but more on that later. The first order for the T-50S came in May of 1935, and the first aircraft were delivered in December of 1935. Now, when they were doing testing on these aircraft, they ran into a little bit of a problem. The reason they named it the Black Egg initially was because of the color of the aircraft. But there was also some other issues with the engine that they were having. Now that was the Pratt & Whitney R1340, and this engine only produced 450 horsepower, so they weren't sure if they were going to have enough power for the aircraft. The plane was actually supposed to be powered by the X1340, which would produce 600 horsepower. But due to some problems with the X1340, they had to settle for the R1340, which only produced 450 horsepower. But they got the aircraft off the ground with that, and it worked out pretty well. They eventually did replace those engines later on with the X1340S, and they got the full 600 horsepower out of those engines. Once they did that, it was a much better performing aircraft. Now, these aircraft were primarily used as advanced training aircraft. But later on, they were also converted for combat roles. There were several variants that were used for combat roles. The original T-50 was used for basic training, and then the BT-13 was used for advanced training. Then the SNJ was used as a night fighter and also a fighter bomber. And these aircraft were used during World War II, actually. They were sent overseas and they saw combat. They were used in the Philippines, China, Australia, New Guinea, the Pacific, and they were used against both the Japanese and the Germans. Now, the Germans were flying the Bf-109, and the Japanese were flying the Mitsubishi Zeros. And neither of those were a match for the Golden Eagle. The Golden Eagle was a much more powerful aircraft. So many of the pilots who were flying the T-50 Golden Eagles were actually Chinese pilots. They had over 200 T-50s, and they flew over 16,000 combat hours. And they had over 100 victories against the Japanese. So, a pretty impressive aircraft. There was another variant of the T-50 known as the TA-50. This was a two-place trainer version, and this was also used for combat. They actually used it in Korea. So these things were used from World War II all the way into the Korean War. One of the variants also had a torpedo. It could carry a 250-pound torpedo and drop it on the Japanese ships. One of the variants also had rockets on it, and it could carry 6 rockets, and it could use those for anti-ship operations. They could also carry bombs. They could carry machine guns. They could even drop smoke. So it was a very versatile aircraft. This was a very successful aircraft for the US military, and after they stopped using it, they sold a lot of these aircraft to other countries, including China, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, France, Mexico, the Netherlands, the Philippines, Sweden, and even Venezuela. So this was a very successful aircraft for North American aviation. This aircraft was also featured in several movies, including The Best Years of Our Lives. This is a classic film from 1938, and also Flying Tigers, which was released in 1942. Now, there was another manufacturer that was making this aircraft along with North American Aviation. This was manufactured by the Canadian Car and Foundry Company, and they built 25% of the Golden Eagles that were built. So a lot of these aircraft, the parts for them were actually shipped up to Canada, and then they would build them there, and then send them back down to the US. But that's the story behind the T-50 Golden Eagle. This was a very successful aircraft for its time. It was a groundbreaking aircraft, because it was the first all-metal training aircraft for the US military, and it served them well, and it served many other countries well. That's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. We're trying to get this video out there, so help us out and hit that thumbs up button. Also, do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you can get notified every time we post a new video. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching. I'm your host. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.